we're going to call this meeting to order. The Stratford Inland Wetlands Commission meeting of December 15, 2021. First order of business, permit 2016-70, 7.5 has been withdrawn, right, Kel?
What's that? Oh, yeah, the agenda's been revised, so that's.
That's been, so
Yep.
It's withdrawn
You-
or,
The agenda's just been altered.
it's
It
not
was
on the
changed-
agenda no
It was
more.
changed in a timely fashion by FOIA, so
okay, so
we
I
are
don't even have
covered.
to mention this anymore.
Nope, it was completely revised and posted.
Okay.
Okay,
Next order of business, I'll ask for approval of the minutes of November 17th meeting. Motion to approve, we got a second?
Second.
Second by, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, old business. Application 2021-13. Is anyone here that want to speak on that?
Is that Broadridge?
Yep.
Bill Kenny will be right up. He went to get something in his car. He'll be a minute.
Okay,
And the engineer just got a little stucky on traffic. He's over here in 10 minutes.
okay.
Thank you.
So you want to let him give the presentation? Let him give the,
Sure. Good evening. I am Bill Kenny. I'm the principal of William Kenny Associates in Fairfield. I'm a professional wetland scientist, soil scientist, and landscape architect. My firm was hired for this project. We did the mapping of the wetlands on the property, so did the soil investigation with regard to that. And then as the proposed subdivision was developed, we then became involved to assess the wetland conditions, the functions, the values, and look at the proposed development and see how it potentially would impact wetlands or not. And then working with Kelly and the project engineer helped to refine the project over time to make some changes to reduce impacts to the wetlands. And then ultimately we prepared this drawing to show some areas of revegetation and enhancement plantings in and adjacent to wetland areas. Greg Podolsky is the project engineer and overall designer of the subdivision. It's a 20-lot subdivision on Broadbridge Avenue. It's about 500 feet east of the border with the city of Bridgeport. So it's north of Broadbridge. It's a long, thin property that runs north to south. To the east is a couple of roads that come in from the east. And when Greg is on his way to the meeting, I apologize for that, but he has drawings that show the entire parcel. But to the east are the public roads, Second Hill Lane, Ronald Road, Teakwood Drive, and Glen Drive. To the west of the property is UI property, which it's a major utility right-of-way that runs the entire western boundary of the property. There are two wetlands and watercourse systems on the property. One is in the southwest corner. It's in this area of the property right here. This drawing that you're looking at shows pretty much about 2/3 of the property from the central portion of the property to the south. In the top right-hand corner of the drawing, it does on a small scale show the entire property and then helps you to see where this is located overall. So there's a wetland we focused on the central and southern portion because that's where the wetlands are. There aren't wetlands in the northern portion of the property. So there's a wetland in the southwestern corner, primarily a wooded swamp. This wetland's relatively level. And then in the central western portion of the property, well, it actually extends pretty much right across the width of the property. It does. Is a sloping wetland. It's mostly sloping, forested with various small little water courses that make their way through that wetland. It slopes from the east to the west. East is on the bottom of the page, west is on the top. The proposal includes a 20-lot subdivision. In its current configuration, there's no work proposed within a wetland. So we are, in our review, we focus primarily on what are the activities occurring that are outside the wetland that could have an impact. Generally, those are related to activities during construction. So what type of soil erosion and sediment control measures are being proposed to minimize soil erosion and prevent sedimentation so that we're controlling that sediment and preventing it from getting to the wetland and hurting the wetland in some way. So Greg can get into the details of the soil erosion and sediment control plan when he's here. And then, so that's a primary concern is during construction, and then after construction, you want to see, with the introduction of new homes and roadways and driveways, you're certainly modifying the runoff of water, stormwater from the land. So there's a extensive stormwater management proposal with this to collect the water from the new developed areas, collect it, detain it, treat it, so that it is dealt with to address water quality issues as well as quantity issues. So to deal with quality and potential flooding issues. So the stormwater pollution prevention plan has been prepared to mitigate any effects related to that. The 20 lots, you can see there's a home for each lot, a driveway for each lot. There are two roads that are being proposed to, existing roads that are being proposed to extend into the property. One is Ronald Road, and on my map, I'm not sure the name of the northern road. We'll have that when Mr. Podolsky arrives. All of the homes and drives, the proposed homes and drives are more than 50 feet from the wetlands. So the impervious surfaces are more than 50 feet away. There is also one open space lot which covers most of this wetland and most of the central wetland as well is covered by an open space lot. And then in addition to the open space lot, there is a conservation easement located that borders both of these open space areas. We've shown the open space area and the conservation area as one on this drawing. We've indicated to help provide a demarcation and a protection for those areas. We're showing a split rail fence along much of the boundary of that to help to demarcate that. The fence is being used in most of the area, particularly where it's close to a proposed residence. There's a couple areas where the boundary is pretty far. For example, in this area right here, it's pretty far from the house. So we're just, it's in a woodland area, so we're just showing some signs on posts in that area and not a fence in that area. That, I'd be pleased to take any questions that you might have.
Commissioners, have any questions for Mr. Kenny? Yes, good. Yes.
On lot? Yes. So a swamp is generally a term used for a wetland that is forested, versus a marsh is a wetland type that's not forested. It's primarily herbaceous, non-woody plant life, and then a swamp is a major vegetative component are trees. Yes, and we did prepare and submit for you a letter that is titled the Wetland and Watercourse Assessment. It's a, let me see, 8-page letter, and within that we provide a brief description of each wetland area, and within those descriptions we do list some of the plants that we observed in these areas. On page 3 is where we include from page 3 through the top of page 4 is where we describe the wetland conditions. And we could see on there that we have where we say the wetland consists of, there's red maple, American elm, spice bush, there's some invasive multiflora rose, skunk cabbage, and jewelweed. Areas of foxgrape, there's definitely some areas with invasive vines growing. We don't think we included a list for that. Our observations overall, and I could go back and look through our notes, but that it was pretty much typical suburban fauna that you would expect, generalist species that you would expect.
Well, we don't know that. Do you know if there's any endangered or threatened species in this area?
We will go back and check our files for that.
Mr. Chairman, I also have another question.
Go ahead, Mr. McKay.
Can you show us on your drawing where the upland review area is on that drawing?
Yes. So we've marked that with a red dashed line. The wetland line is a red line with a W. It's here, and then you'll see the upland review area.
Which one, 100 feet?
Yes, sir. And then likewise here, there's an upland review area line over here.
Is it your opinion that impacts in the upland review area have impacts on the wetland directly?
It's my opinion, so you can have disturbances within the upland review that have the potential to impact the wetland. And they're primarily, the potential for those impacts to the wetland are primarily related to stormwater, water runoff. So soil erosion, sedimentation during construction, and then the changes from, for example, a forest to a lawn. So you have changes in pollutant loads and the amount of runoff from a surface like that. So with proper mitigation measures, soil erosion and sediment controls, and with stormwater management, best management practices, you can then prevent those impacts that could occur from disturbances in the upland review area. You can use those best management practices to avoid impacts to the wetlands.
That's interesting. Your report says in almost every case, and I think in fact in every case, you use the word unchanged in every bullet.
For the functions. Are you
Yes,
referring
for
to
the
table?
functions. The functions have a direct impact on the wetland, on the fauna and the flora of the wetland. Don't you believe that?
So,
We believe that.
no, I agree with that. So that table that I'm referencing are the functions of the wetland. The functions of the wetland. The wetland has groundwater discharge function, a groundwater recharge function. It provides habitat. So the wetland isn't being physically altered in any way.
But
And through
But
the
we-
mitigation
we
measures.
We just agreed that there's impacts from the upland review area on the wetlands, and if there's impacts on the wetlands, then how can the wetlands be unchanged?
But no, I'm sorry, maybe I can clarify. There's a potential for impacts, but if you have a project which includes soil erosion and sediment control management plan and a stormwater management plan, and you install that and maintain it, you avoid those impacts. And so our conclusion is with the use of those best management practices, you avoid an impact to the wetland.
Do you believe clear cutting and fertilization and all the rest of the things that go with a residential development don't have any impacts at all?
Within the context of this.
It's only the construction phase?
No.
Well, that's what you're saying.
No, I'm sorry, that's not what I said.
Oh, I misunderstood you.
There's two primary. I talk about activities during construction, and then I talk about best management practices that occur, that deal with stormwater runoff after construction. So and Greg Podolsky, he can get into the details of that, but stormwater from the roof and the driveways and from the roads is being collected, directed to, in some instances, subsurface infiltration and recharge chambers. In other instances, it's being directed to surface stormwater basins, and through the use of these best management practices, the water is cleaned and it's detained so as to avoid impacts to the wetlands.
Yes? Yep, go ahead.
I took a drive up there. I haven't had a chance to actually walk Ronald Road and Eastwood. But for example, I noticed at the end of those roads there, they have those gray kind of like, not the Jersey barriers, but the other barriers on the road ends. Okay, so did you walk that area as well?
Yes. And I've walked the property as well as two other biologists from my office, so.
And what did you find at the terminus of Ronald Road and Teakwood? Like what's right over on the other side of those barriers?
I have to check our notes for those specific areas.
So is there, you don't remember if there's like water coming out of them or what's growing there?
What I can say is we began by walking the entire site to map features that would be considered a wetland or a watercourse. So we went out, we marked those features, we flagged them. You can see our flags out there. They're numbered consecutively. They mark the boundary of the wetland areas that, in our opinion, meet the definition of a wetland or a watercourse under the state statutes and your regulations. So if those areas have been marked and other areas of the property we checked and we didn't find any soils or features that meet the definition, in our professional opinion, to be a wetland or a watercourse.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
Okay. So in your professional opinion, in your opinion, when those barriers come down at the end of the road, I guess, again, on Ronald and Teakwood, how is that going to environmentally impact that area, right on the other side of the barrier?
So there's going to be disturbance to upland areas, and so trees will be removed, the ground will be graded. In some cases, a road will be paved, or a driveway will be installed, or a building will be constructed.
Okay, and again, I know there are residences, again, at the end of these roads. How are their properties going to be impacted?
So I'm here to talk about impacts to the wetlands. When you say impacts to those properties, what are, could you explain that a little more?
Well, in other words, for example, again, I'm just curious. So like where you have lot 12, and then you said there's open space there and it slopes from east to west. Okay, and then you have the trees drawn in.
Yes.
Okay, so again, I know there, like I said, I haven't walked it, I've driven by, but again, I know there are residents there. Do they currently have any kind of wetlands on their properties?
So
And would those be impacted by this construction?
We have not we don't have permission to walk those properties, and we have not walked those properties. So I can't say for sure whether there's wetlands or not on those properties.
All right, can I ask another question?
Yes.
Okay, so on Broadbridge Avenue, I know if you go a little farther up, there's a house there, there's a property there. Again, did you see that? Or, like, again, I would have to look at it, the whole thing. I know like there's UI and then there's a private residence. Okay, again, do they have wetlands on their property and can you see them from this?
Could you explain where the location you're referring to?
Like if you go up, like you said, it's right across from Bridgeport. Like Bridgeport's over here.
Yes.
And then if you keep going on Broadbridge, there's a residence like right about,
You have
Here.
the UI right-of-way first, which
Okay.
is pretty wide through here, and then the resident, I think it's maybe 100 feet wide. 200 or 300 feet wide, and so the house is, and the two wetland systems extend off-site, and then they do make their way through the right-of-way.
Okay.
And the houses are on the other side of that wetland.
okay. All right, I think I'm good.
Any more questions for Mr. Kenny before the engineer speaks?
How big are these houses going to be, and how much property are they going to have?
Okay. I think that question would be better answered by the project engineer.
Okay.
Come on up, sir. State your name, please, and
Good evening,
address.
Commissioners, I'm Gregory Podleski. I'm a licensed professional engineer and land surveyor.
Could you spell your name, please?
Sure. P as in Peter, I, D as in David, L-U, S as in Sam, K-I. And if you'd like, I've got I could just give a business card.
Yeah, just hand it. Could you grab that there? Could you grab? Thank you.
Okay. Basically what I did when I did this design was I figured out what's the maximum that's likely to be built here, because I want, if we do get the approvals from the town, this commission and planning and zoning, if we come back for an alteration, we want it to be for something less than you saw, rather than something where we got to increase it. So towards that, we made the houses with an 1,800 square foot footprint. We showed all of the driveways for a 2-car driveway. We expanded the lawn area. The maximum we think that anybody will expand the lawn. It's very possible that the lawns might not be constructed as fully as they're shown on here. And we went and designed the stormwater mitigation so that each individual residence has an underground retention system to fully accept all of the roof runoff and driveway runoff from a 100-year, 24-hour storm. So there's minimal water coming off any of the developed properties. The water that's generated by the streets, before it goes any further, it goes through a hydrodynamic separator, and then it goes into a level spreader, which is a 4x4 concrete gallery that's buried up to the top in the ground with gravel around it, so the water will go into it, bubble out. Because the hydrodynamic separator, very, very few, if any, sediments should enter that, but any sediments that do enter that are going to be, again, filtered by the gravel. And due to the length of the hydrodynamic separator, the waters that are generated coming out are going to come out at very low velocity because they're going to be spread out for an extended length. So they're going to be coming out at a very low rate. They're going to be something slightly above a trickle. And what we did have to do, because the town engineer requested that we provide 100% stormwater mitigation for a 100-year storm, which on a site that's presently wooded and Class B soils required a lot of creativity to achieve those goals. And we were, even without the retention basin, we were able to achieve 0 increase in total runoff, but there was a small increase in the peak flow rates, and that's a major concern of the city, the town engineer. So that's the reason that we incorporated the retention basin. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I did go and prepare, I had gotten Ms. Kerrigan's latest review that was published with this. I've got a draft review that either acknowledges that we understand her concerns and that we're addressing them. There's a couple of things where we feel the information has already been provided, but we will take efforts to clarify that. One question that she did have that I'd like to address is she was asking if the driveways could be merged for lot 18 and 20. I suppose they could be, but it's been my experience that shared driveways have a tendency to create neighbor disputes, especially when you've got a long distance to go to the road, which means it's very likely that you'll get two-way traffic from the two different parties. And it is rather remote from the wetlands, and that's why we elected to do the two separate driveways. But I can give you a copy of the written response.
Yeah, we'll keep it in a record.
Okay.
Right, Kellen, we'll keep a copy of it. Yeah, you could.
You want this? Yeah, certainly. It is a draft review. Basically, a lot of it is, it tells you how we're responding to her concerns, acknowledgement of her concerns, and that we're aware of them, and we're working on addressing them.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions of the engineer?
There is no storm drains, you're saying, on the property?
There is storm drainage within the road, of course.
Okay, yes, yeah.
The individual houses, each one goes to an individual Cultec underground plastic chamber system that's been sized to take 100% of the water from the roof and from the driveways for a 100-year storm. And they're shown graphically on the maps. It is rather difficult to read. There's so much information on the maps. But on, I forget which detail sheet it is. It's the last or next to last detail sheet. I did go and put a key diagram that shows a typical house, typical piping, typical location of the Cultec units. There's details of the Cultec units. I also went and printed out a spreadsheet because the different sizes of the lots, different configurations, different configurations of the driveways. There's a different number of units that are used, but I went and presented a calculation sheet that shows how, 18 units of Cultex will accommodate, this much storage. In the stormwater management report, each house is individually calculated and routed through its own individual underground chamber. There's a great deal of detail on it, just to show that it does work, the way that I'm representing it to the commission.
Anyone else?
Okay, so I have a question. You said this took a lot of creativity with the retention basins. Can you expand on that, please?
I'm sorry, what was,
You said took a lot of creativity.
yes.
Can you expand on that, please?
Well, a lot of creativity. The retention basin is the final piece of the puzzle. To achieve it, these soils, which are very, very pervious soils, and the leaf litter in a forested area really reduces the runoff. So matching that makes a very high threshold, if you will, to achieve the 100%, the reduction of the 100%. And our first step on that, as I said, is providing the underground storage to accommodate the 100-year runoff from the impervious areas on each lot. That was the first step. The second step was to take the runoff from the roads and get them into the existing water courses without putting undue stress on the water courses. And as I said, we went and collected the water in standard catch basins with 2-foot sumps and siphon hoods, and then goes and routes through hydrodynamic separators, which will, swirl chambers, that'll take out the sediments, precipitate them to the bottom, and any oils and greases are going to be, arise to the top, so that periodically it can be cleaned out. And then the next step was to go and put it through these level spreaders, so that the velocity coming down the hillside of the water is going to be minimal, so that we're not going to be, we don't have any point source discharges. So there's no area where it's going to be prone to excessive erosion. And then, again, all of that in and of itself was sufficient to reduce the runoff from the site to pre-disturbance levels for a 100-year storm. However, we were, I'm going to say 10 to 15% higher than the pre-disturbance rates for the site in its entirety. And the way that we achieved that is by creating a retention basin. Again, a retention basin, its only outlet is percolation into the soils. We did provide an emergency overtopping, of course, for getting 2 back-to-back 100-year storms. For instance, there has to be a safe way for the water to get out if it's going to overtop. So we did provide for that, and it was a multi-step process to achieve some very high goals.
Okay. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Mm-hmm.
Good? Okay. So when you say cleaned out, who's going to do the cleaning out?
We anticipate the stormwater system is going to be transferred to the town, along with the same way that the roads will be dedicated to the town. We're anticipating that the town will ultimately take responsibility for the retention basin, only because the nature of the property with individual property owners. In my experience, when you've got a basin like that, that's, you can't really expect individual property owners to even understand what the concerns are, let alone get them to take action on their own. It doesn't happen. So we're trying to be understanding of the realities of it. And again, as I've said in my letter, the only reason we have that retention basin is to meet the town engineer's desire to meet the 100-year peak flow rate, which I think is laudable. I certainly have no issues with that. It tends to be on the high side, but he's explained to me his concerns about flooding downstream, significantly downstream of the site, which he wants to make sure nothing increases the problems that are experienced down there. So I have no issues with that. If he were to say, we can make a slightly lower threshold, we'd certainly be able to reduce and maybe even eliminate that retention basin. I'm not saying that he will. I'm not saying that he should. I'm just saying if he were to do that, we can accommodate that.
Okay.
That's the only point I'm making.
Okay, and then about the roads. So did you do it from, again, Ronald and Teakwood, or Broadbridge, or both?
I'm sorry,
Sorry, with I didn't jot it down, the water assessment, how much is going in?
it's all in the 500-page report. And I don't have a 500-page report committed to memory. I'm sorry.
Okay, I was just gonna ask, because again, there's a big difference between, again, the side roads and Broadbridge.
Well,
Because again, the way Broadbridge
Yeah.
slopes.
yeah,
And the
we're
other roads
really
are
not
like this.
discharging any water other than, in the shoulder, which is a very large shoulder, into Broadbridge. Everything else is being collected on site and redirected within the site. Just from the size of it, I'm saying, I'm figuring, at least 50% of the stormwater that's being generated outside of the lots themselves, I'm going to say just, don't hold me to it, but 50 to 60% is going to be coming off of Teakwood and the remainder off of Ronald. But, again, I'm just doing a rule of thumb sort of thing. I'm not looking at the actual calculations.
I think
Anyone else?
Yeah, how big are the lot sizes? Did you say how big the lot sizes were?
I'm sorry?
How big the lot sizes were?
The lot sizes range from 10,000 to, I think lot 20 is, the numbers aren't on here.
Roughly, quarter-acre
I
lots?
think the majority of the lots are in the quarter-acre range.
Quarter-acre range.
But
you're there.
lot 20 is probably getting closer to 1 acre.
Mhm.
A lot of that is very heavily sloped area that's really not conducive to development.
Anyone? Yes, John?
Question. Because there's not going to be any septic or wells in this area, where are all the utilities going to be connected, given the flow of everything? Is it all going to,
We've got the sanitary so that it's all designed to be gravity to go out to Broadbridge.
so it's all going to go out to Broadbridge?
All the sanitary, all the way from the end of Teakwood, all the way through, is gonna go through what's gonna be a municipal sanitary sewer connecting up to Broadbridge. And it's all gonna be gravity. And, you know, Ms. Kerrigan requested that we show the sanitary laterals. We're in the process of doing that now. As far as gas, water, telephone, electric, cable TV, those are, you know, those have no limitations with regard to gravity. So presumably, well, obviously they're gonna go and feed through the streets, and then they're gonna provide individual house services. I do not know whether gas is available or whether it's gonna be provided. I just put that out there as just a standard utility.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So if you're saying that the sewage pipes are gonna go from Teakwood out to Broadbridge?
Correct.
And I just wanna make sure I understood Mr. Kenny correctly. This part here near Lot 12, you said it slopes from west to east, going down. You said this is all gravity, so are the sewage lines gonna go?
Yeah, we've been in verbal consultation with the neighbor right next door to Lot 12. And in concept, he's amenable to granting us an easement for the sanitary sewer to run through his property. You know, there's a lot of terms that are, I'm sure, are gonna go with it. He's reluctant to give it, and obviously the developers are reluctant to give him money for it until such time as we know that that they've got the approvals for the subdivision in place.
So what
But
if,
we've got a verbal understanding. You know, I don't know, I don't think they've got anything written even as a, you know, an agreement to proceed, but there is a verbal agreement.
okay, so what if he says no?
We're gonna have to go with Plan B.
And what's Plan
And
B?
we haven't investigated Plan B yet.
So you have no plans, what else?
We'll have to modify the plans. We'll have to find a way to modify the plans. And, you know, I would certainly invite the commission, if you see to approve this, you know, to grant that as a condition, that easement has to be executed and on the land records. You know, we couldn't proceed without it, because if we go and change the location, obviously that changes what this commission has seen and what they would approve, should you see fit to approve it. So, I mean, that would be a standard condition of any approval you might choose to grant. You know, we certainly have no issue with that. As a matter of fact, we'd encourage you to do that.
So did you give him a timeline for yay or nay?
We did not. You know, just, you know, they're offering, and not only to offer him some money, but also to do some improvements with his house. Presently, he has a pump sewage system, and they would be willing to go and convert that and put in a gravity system that would actually even allow him to have facilities in the basement that would allow him to discharge into that pressure, and I'm sorry, into the gravity line. And those are some of the things that he took into consideration before he entered the verbal agreement.
Okay, so how old is his system now? Did you discuss
The house,
that?
I think, was built in the mid-'80s, and it would probably be original to that house. Although I do not know, I haven't investigated that.
Okay. No, I'm just curious again, if you're gonna inspect it to make sure there's no major problems with it before you enter into the written contract. Just curious.
Yeah, you know, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay.
Okay,
Just one other question,
yes.
quick. On your walkthrough in this area, it's a heavily wooded area. What kind of wildlife impact are we gonna have, if any, in this area? Because I know there's a lot of deer in that area that occasionally, you know, I'm just curious if you know what's in that area.
I'm sorry, I'm not an environmentalist, so I
Okay.
don't think I'm qualified, and perhaps Mr. Kenny can address that?
Okay.
There, certainly deer and other, the common suburban species you'd expect to see, like fox, coyote, skunk, possum. And so there will be certainly in the upland area displacement of those common wildlife generalist species. But with the protection of the wetlands, there won't be an impact to the species that are within the wetland itself.
Okay. There's only two things we could do with this. You want to say?
I just want to add a little something to it. Again, I'm not an environmentalist by any stretch, but I would point out that immediately adjacent to this property is a very large UI tract. It was stated before it was an easement. It's actually, the UI owns the fee on it. So, I mean, that's never going to get developed. Now, it is clear it doesn't have a wooded cover, but that still provides some level of habitat for a lot of the animals. So I'm just,
Yep,
you know,
thank you.
putting that out there.
Okay, this time, there's only two things we could do. We could either accept this application, or I want to get how the commissioners feel. You feel we have enough information to accept this, or do you want to table it till next meeting?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like some questions from the superintendent. Kelly, there's an awful lot in your report, a lot of phrases that are discomforting, such as needs to be worked on, does not provide, working on. A lot of those phrases are there in terms of your questions. You feel that this is complete? But we've got to be careful, this commission's got to be careful that we don't get into a situation where we call it a complete application and have things hanging. We end up where we have to rush for a vote. And in many cases, it's a denial, because that's our only alternative. I think there's still a few things that have to be added to this application to make a adequate decision. And I would suggest that even though we've had a presentation tonight, there seems to be a lot of more information that's required. And when we get this, it's simply going to be another month, that's all. I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that we put this back on the table.
I'm going to ask for a motion to table this. till
I
next month.
second it.
I think we're going to need a public hearing on this.
Yeah, that's
Well,
down the road,
we have to
John.
wait till we accept it as an application
Yes.
before we make a vote for.
Okay, I need a motion to table this.
Motion to table.
Second by Dennis.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Really happy. Okay, new business. Anything, Kel? Staff report? When you-
Can you all hear me? Okay. So, starting with 350 Whippoorwill Lane, our attorneys found 3 possible addresses that the permit holder could possibly live at. And we sent 3 certified letters to these addresses, and 1 has been received as of this meeting. And additionally, the permit holder has reached out to his previous agent, Nick Owen, who is now continuing to be his agent, to ask him to appear before the commission on his behalf. Nick did not get notice in a timely fashion from the permit holder, so he asked if we could postpone till January. And I consulted with our attorneys on this, and they did agree that we should give the applicant's agent a chance to come before the commission if they are willing to do so. So we will be postponing that public hearing until January 19th, and I will be noticing that in the paper, going through the whole statutory requirement again on that. So looking forward to discussing that with that permit holder's agent. Additionally, I did want to note that one of the neighboring properties has reached out to me on multiple occasions, and he has he has spoken with the other adjoining properties, and there is interest to purchase or somehow acquire this property, and potentially put a conservation easement on it, potentially provide the restoration we're looking for. The conversations are just starting, it sounds like, between the property owner and the adjacent owner, so it's kind of preliminary at this point, but that could potentially provide a way for the commission to be made whole on the clear cutting that occurred.
That's positive.
Somewhat.
Somewhat.
Any questions? Go ahead.
No, good.
I think Bill. Oh, that's the problem.
Any permit administrative?
Wait, I think hold on. I'm not quite sure. I haven't spoken with him. Yeah, at this point, Nick did say he has moved to Florida, so he is not even in the state anymore. So I don't think so either, but.
I just hope that we can recoup something. Hopefully this will do it.
Mhm.
But we'll see. We'll hear what Mr. Owens has to say. Oh, boy. I mean, it should be interesting anyway, Bill, whatever he's gonna say. Anything to tell Administrator?
All right, so that's it for 350 Whippoorwill. The Conservation Commission is still working on the native planting guide for this commission to have in its pocket. Most of these performance bonds still going back and forth with Joe Owen on most of them. He's the permit or the agent on most of these. Lindquist Drive is not responding to me at all anymore. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if they're forfeiting their bond or what. But for the Ferry Boulevard 71-unit apartment building, there's $500 left in that account, and I'm going to recommend that that be released. That was we held the $500 for the vegetation stabilization for that 1 year of the growing season, and that is acceptable at this time. So if the commission would like to entertain.
Make a motion to release the bond?
Second.
Second it.
All in favor?
All right, excellent. And then lastly, in my administrative report, I have prepared one administrative permit for a residential addition within the upland review area of Cook's Pond on Circle Drive. And that is all.
Commissioners Forum, anybody want to say anything? I know we don't have too many people here.
Same to you.
I make a motion to close the meeting?